great to feel like you're part of something bigger than yourself. So give yourself a round of applause, please. So 2 things. First, I must explain this hat. I bought this hat to embarrass my children. And, but it's turned into a magical hat because wherever I wear it, wherever I go in the world, it appears to be an invitation to a conversation. People stop and say, amazing hat. And then I talk to them, and I found out how amazing they are. But I'll put it down here so as to not distract us. The second thing I want to point out is that he made it sound heroic that I came here by boat. Sailed here by boat, I think he said. No, I came on a cruise ship in luxury. And then I came by train from Hamburg to here. And that was an inspiring experience because nobody stopped me and nobody asked me who I was or why I was there. And yet a mere 13 years before I was born, coming by train to Poland meant something very different for you and for the people on the train. And in fact, in September, when that happened, my mother, who was born in the United States and a naturalized born American citizen, and her father, who was a German American, escaped from Italy on the last plane out of Rome and to Portugal, where they sailed on the last boat before the U-boat started sinking them. And when they arrived in New York City and presented their passports, they said, "Welcome home." I'd like you to go on a journey with me. So sit down and relax and close your eyes and imagine you're at home and it's cold out, but there's a warm fire. And you're a father and your only son has been called to fight in a war that you consider illegal, immoral, and unwinnable. Now open your eyes. My father was that father, I was that son, and the war was the Vietnam War. It's the middle of January 1973, and I've received notice I'm to report to the Army on the last day of that month. And my father sits me down at our dining room table, and he says, "Now it is time to talk about war." He says, "War does things to you that can never be undone." He says, "Dying is the easy part, because then for you, the war is over." He says, "Worse is seeing a buddy die, and worse still is to see a buddy die and know you could have prevented it. But the worst thing of all," he says, "is to look through your gun sight at someone's father, someone's son, someone's brother, and someone's husband, and know you're about to execute a man for the crime of wanting to kill you as much as you want to kill him." He says, that is when you see evil in your own soul. He says, in World War II, when he was fighting the Japanese, he was not fighting to oppress the Japanese or the Germans, but to liberate them from tyranny. And that war would not be over until the Japanese and the Germans were glad that we had won. He says, when you look through your gun sight at a soldier in Vietnam, you should know why he wants to kill you. He's defending his home. But you must ask yourself, do you know why you want to kill him? He says you have 2 choices. If you believe your country is under a credible threat, you must heed the call to war and join. Or if you feel your country needs you to speak with a dissenting voice, then you must not go and go to jail and speak from there. He says both those choices are honorable, and I'll be proud of you, and they're both patriotic. And then he bursts into tears. And he says, I ask why, and he says, well, I can't stand the thought of losing you to a war I consider immoral, illegal, and unwinnable. And I'm thinking about suggesting you sneak into Canada. And I consider that shameful and unpatriotic because it's abandoning your country in time of need. Give me a second. I've thought a lot recently about what it means to be an American because I've been ashamed of our electoral politics and because now our elected leaders are asking us to make America great again. So it would seem reasonable. I know what that means. And so I started asking my fellow Americans, and they said, surprisingly, the majority refused to answer. So I thought back to how I was raised. And when I was raised, every day in school, we were asked to stand and to recite this: the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Except that I stopped saying under God because it seemed arrogant and not like liberty and justice for all. And later during the Vietnam War, some people said the war was wrong, and other people said my country right or wrong. But I was raised to believe that the protester and the platoon leader were both patriots. So I stopped saying, I stopped pledging allegiance to the United States of America, but only to Republican form of government and to liberty and justice for all. And I was free to do that. You don't have to say that pledge. Now, a little about the history that I was taught. Oh, I'm sorry. The pledge, as it turns out, I had returned to the pledge as it was originally penned in 1892 by a minister named Francis Bellamy. I pledge allegiance to my flag and to the republic for which it stands, one nation indivisible with liberty and justice for all. And he did not write that for the United States, but for peoples of all countries who believed in self-government and in liberty and justice for all, so they could remind themselves of what they stood for. And it was in the 1920s that we added the United States of America. And only 12 days before I was born, in 1952, we added under God to distinguish ourselves from godless communists. And it worked, but it made us less one nation and more divisible. Now, a bit about our nation. This is the battlefield at Gettysburg in our most bloody Civil War over what it means to be an American. And who gets liberty and justice for all? Does it include slaves? And at that field, our president, Abraham Lincoln, said, "These people must not have died in vain, but rather so that our nation can have a rebirth in freedom. And so that government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from this earth." And the world needed that to not perish from this earth because other countries were having problems. Take France, for example. They had a problem. The problem was Napoleon III. Napoleon I's nephew was elected in 1848 democratically as head of the Second French Republic, or Republic 2.0. But he proved to be less of a republican more of a salesman. And he established the Second Empire and made himself emperor in a bid to make France great again. And it was during that time that the French people decided to give us a heroic statue. This statue. It's a tourist attraction in New York Harbor, but they did not give it to us to attract tourists. They gave it to us to remind themselves. And they called it liberty enlightening in the world. And in the crook of her in her right arm, she holds a flame representing liberty, and in the crook of her left arm are the laws that are necessary if there's to be liberty and justice for all. Now, 2 days ago, I had an unexpected experience. Who here has heard of something called Couchsurfing? Okay, so more than half this audience, the rest of you ask them. It's an organization of over 7 million people, so the size of a large city or a small country. And these are people who will host the stranger when they travel. And I got 6 of them together, 1 American, 3 Poles, 1 Ukrainian, and I treated them to dinner. 6, including me. And I treated them to dinner, and I asked them, what does it mean to you to be American? And the American says, I don't know. I think of myself as a human first and a woman second, and I'm embarrassed to think of myself as a woman because I don't see, that separates me from men. And the Pole said, I don't know. And the Ukrainian said, I think I know and I'm ashamed of it, because he was running from his draft. He said because he's being asked to fight either on the side of crooks or on the side of tyrants, and he wants to have nothing to do with that. So then I asked them what it means to be a couch surfer, and they exploded, and they explained what that was. And then I remembered. I received a letter. I asked a woman, a young woman in Vietnam. Well, actually, I asked a friend of mine, a 75-year-old Vietnam War veteran, who was a helicopter pilot in Vietnam and now a couch surfer. And he's been to Vietnam 7 times building libraries in rural parts of Vietnam. So I asked him what it meant to him, and he forwarded it to his young friends in Hanoi. And this is what I got back less than 20 minutes later. Let me read it. He says, Couchsurfing brings me friendship and joys and chances. As a starter, I have a good pen pal in Spain. It says, I bring close friends and I know I can be welcome anywhere I go. And as a result, I had a couchsurfing community in Hue. And we often do voluntary work with orphans. So couchsurfing is not really, in its black and white meaning, finding a couch for the homeless. Above that, it is where people share their love, hobbies, community, where only the greatest people exist, where no wars happen, where the safety and laughter exist. Couchsurfing saves people from the uncertainty and loneliness. Excuse me. All from couchsurfing, we start to get to know friends of our beloved couchsurfers. Besides me, besides laughter, it has brought me love, dear and best friends. I think I can speak for all the community of couchsurfers that we consider our couchsurfing as home. And I think about my mom being invited home, and I think about when I was teaching at university, I had a student who was a recovering heroin addict, and I said, why? You're smart. Why would you take heroin? And he said, because it feels like home. He says, when you know what it feels like to be home, you will do anything for that feeling. So let's try another thought experiment. Get comfortable. Close your eyes, relax. Let your brain go to sleep and go down into your heart. And then past your heart, go to your soul. And notice that there's evil there, lurking behind fear, which is what stokes evil. And then turn to the light and see love and feel it in yourself and reflect it in all the people around you. And then know with your heart that everyone in this room has your back. Right? Now come back up from your soul through your heart to your head and open your eyes, and with your brain know that everyone in this room has your back. Welcome home. That's what it feels like. So I thought about what I would pledge my allegiance to. And I decided to write my own pledge, not to a country, but to an idea and a dream. That was Napoleon III. He's not my dream. And this is why I hadn't thought about what it means to be American. since January 28th, 1973, when this was the headline, 2 days before I was due to report to the Army. Peace signed, draft ended, and I was told I didn't have to go. So I stopped thinking about what it means to be an American until recently. And I realized what I have to think about is what it means to be me. So what do I pledge my allegiance to? So I pledge my allegiance to an idea that all people have an equal right to liberty and justice, and to the dream that government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from this earth. And I'd love for you, perhaps silently or out loud if you wish, in a few moments I'll repeat this, and perhaps you will too. You don't need your nation or your neighbor to believe as you do. You just have to believe it, and you only have to believe it for this moment, and you can change your mind tomorrow. But the reason I'd like you to do it is because in my nation, some people are into building walls. They're building walls between rich and poor, between red and blue, between me and you. And I fear they will build walls so high that, and so gold-plated, that the reflected light of Lady Liberty's torch will blind us into self-righteousness while extinguishing her light to guide the rest of the world. And one day I might need one of you to set up a megaphone outside one of our walls and shout, "Mr. President, tear down this wall." And then perhaps we will find the courage to tear down our own walls, just as happened not long ago here all over Europe. So this is my pledge. Perhaps you'll read it and you'll hear it in your own head. I pledge allegiance to an idea that all people have an equal right to liberty and justice, and to the dream that government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from this earth. I didn't mean this as a political speech. I'm just here in the spirit of TED and hope you'll spread my idea and my dream. Thank you.